Friends online, thank you for keeping faith and welcome to next year's monthly webinar on the policing conversation. So this morning, we'll be looking at coordinating multiple levels of policing in Nigeria. We have, wonderful guests here, experts and, practitioners and, academia to, speak to us on the issues around coordination of multiple levels of policing. But before I introduce the guest, just a quick intro so that guests online can catch up with us. So you would remember that in 2025, Nigeria experienced some coordinated attacks and insecurity, was rising in terms of kidnapping, killings and group violence, banditry. And the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, made a speech, declared a state of emergency, and then encouraged the lawmakers to look. That something urgent must be done to establish, state police. And in keeping faith with that, we have seen our lawmakers, they stepped up immediately, and so much has been achieved in terms of, putting the process for Nigeria to have a state police. But then in having state police, is state police a silver bullet? What are the challenges? What must be put in place to ensure that state police is fit for purpose? And so today, we have experts to speak to us on the critical issue of coordination. We have with us from my far left, Professor Etannibi Alemika, a professor of Criminology and Sociology of Law. I mean, once you talk about policing, you already, his name is synonymous with discourses around policing. Prof, you are welcome to this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and also we also have Napoleon Enayaba. He's a program specialist, rule of law and human rights with UNDP Abuja. And of course, before then, he also worked on various spaces, platforms that deals with issues around policing, issues around human rights, and all that. I mean, we are blessed with wonderful speakers today. You're welcome, Napoleon.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, before I begin, just a quick look at what the data says. You know that, for the past 6 years, Nextier has been collecting robust data, maintaining database on violent incidents across Nigeria. And, from the time in November or so that the president talked about establishing state police, one would have thought that, the criminals, the perpetrators of insecurity would have, started missing even before hearing about our wonderful police now. They're already doing the work as a good work as federal police. By the time we have state police, that would be dangerous for them. But the data from next year shows that, it is not yet uhuru, as some will say. For instance, if we look at year-on-year data from next year on violent incidents across Nigeria, we saw that in January, for instance, there was close to 200% increase if you compare incidents in January 2025 with incidents in January 2026, meaning that the situation is worsening. As at June, the data for June showed that, again, there was over 100% increase when you compare violent incident in June in June 2026 with violent incident in June 2025. Now, we have made progress towards, bringing up, or establishing or setting up the legal framework for state policing. Remember that this is a federal system. And one of the fathers of federalism, Professor K.C. Ware, in his work, when he talked about federalism, he said that two important issues about federalism: coordination and independence. In fact, he defined federalism where, each level, of government will be independent and will be there will be coordination and there will be independent. And so when you also bring this down to policing, in a federal system like Nigeria, you see that policing is also a reflection of whatever kind of federalism you practice. So the issue of coordination becomes critical. Prof, I want to begin with you. I mean, what do you think about coordination as Nigeria transits to multiple levels of policing?
Okay, thank you very much. I always like starting this on a very clear level. Young people will say on the same page. I think there are a lot of confusion between understanding what is police and what is policing. And I always try to clarify that so that we can have good discussion. First, police simply refers to agency and officials of government responsible for law enforcement and other maintenance, while policing refers to activities undertaken to ensure compliance with culture, with cultural norms, legal norms, economic norms, values, and what have you. And if by this definition already you see that right from childhood, from family, where you are taught what is proper behavior and improper behavior, policing have started. So policing is activity undertaken by numerous groups, numerous institutions. And in fact, police is a minority. By the time you bring police into policing, it means those have failed or inadequate. So I think this first is important. With respect to state police establishment in Nigeria, the agitation has been quite on since 1999. And the argument is always about federalism. It's true, and I think that's the strongest argument for state police, that in most, if not all, federal system today, there are at least two levels of police agencies, one for federal and one for state. And another point that I think is very important to underscore is that police as an agency is probably the most difficult to reform anywhere in the world for two reasons. One, among government agencies, police have one of the greatest contact with citizens. Almost, I think next to it is education. Health actually does not even have as much as police. So citizens are aware of what police as officials are doing, and therefore that invoke quite a lot of disparate attitudes towards the police. The second thing, when I said difficult to, again, is the fact that that contact, police is also again, the one with which you have routine contact, which has one of the widest discretion, but also authority to use violence. Violence means to enforce the law. I think when discussing policing in Nigeria or anywhere, this point are very important. So we're on trying to have two levels of police. I think, again, what is important is why is there so much what looks like consensus? In the past, each time you've raised it, those who say, what do they call it it's their National Assembly, nay or yea, yeah, or whatever it is. Those who say no are usually a majority, and those who say yes are usually a minority. In the early, I think about 2007-8, the House of Rep actually conducted a national survey, and it was a resounding no that there would be no need for state police. Why we're having this at this time, of course, two reasons. One is that we're having a lot of insecurity, and two, the president supported it from not because of the insecurity alone, but from his background as a restructuring advocate. But here is the danger. People writing the history of Nigeria in 20 years' time will underscore the fact that there's never been a time when a consensus like this have actually been achieved, but as a distraction. I think we need to underscore this. Many things are happening in Nigeria since the state police have become an issue. Do you hear people discussing a lot about economic crisis, about political, crisis, surrounding all these political parties wanting to contest election next year? All those ones have been forgotten, and state police is the latest discussion in town. And I think that is a great achievement of the government, to distract citizens from what is about their livelihood, what is important to them about the cause actually the most effective means of security. I say effective means of security because state police, whether federal or state, cannot provide the security in the context in which we find ourselves. And I'll give you, why that will not be the case. Countries that have faced the kind of insecurity we have today, and they have plural level of police, have actually gone for national police. I'll give you 2 examples. Netherlands. When Netherlands was facing all this question of cyber crimes, organized crimes in around 2008, 2009 to 2012, what did they do? They collapsed their regional or police forces and create one single national police, but with regional commands, the kind of structure we have now.
Okay.
Similar thing also happened in the context of Scotland. Scotland also had about 10 police forces, which they again put together. As we speak, at the beginning of this year, Britain has issued a white paper where it's collapsing its 43 police forces centrally. So no country in recent times has solved the kind of crime we have by decentralizing. And I think that is the greatest danger and ignorance which is perpetuated by people shouting state police. State police has a role. It's good in terms of visibility, which can indeed help with fear of crime. Where you see a police, even when your victimization rate has not decreased or declined, you have some assurance that there's a police around. That is the function that local police have performed most in many places. In cases where there are infrastructure, they've always provided social services, where old people are looking for their dogs or their cats, and they help them look for it. They are also provide those services. But in terms of security of the kind of terrorism that we have, local police are useless in doing it. That's why we move from federal police to the army. You can see the folly around the whole thing. We thought Nigeria police force couldn't do it, and we brought in the army. And we now say the army cannot do it. It's creating a local police that will solve the problem. That's why I say it's success in distraction for this government using that state police and insecurity as a solution to the insecurity, which is concern for everybody. Coordination is interesting, usually because there are 2 levels. The coordination rests with each of them. Each level of government coordinate their own. But of course, we must also look at maturity of federal system. Nigeria adopted federalism in 1960. It died in 1966, and we've only started it again in 1990. So we're a very young country with respect to adopting a federal system. While this was happening, the old federal system actually are moving away from the old system of more or less antagonistic relationship between the federal and the state. They are moving to what is now called cooperative federalism, where the 2 of them come together to solve a problem. Okay. And each of them contributes to problem solving, rather than antagonizing each other. This is my territory, this is your territory. I think cooperative federalism that are evolving indeed has been the order in more recent times. And even America we refer to, you find that America, in a way, actually control the state through many grants is provided. If you want community policing, it tells state police as the state as if you adopt state policing, we'll give you this amount of money per year to do it. So we really need to understand the complexity. But I think for us, it shouldn't be something new. We have Ministry of Education. We have all many things that are already on concurrent list for many years. And then we see how they wander out, and the federal government often perform better than the state at every level. So I think that it is something we need to watch, because, like I said, police is difficult because it's an agency which carries the authority to use violence by the state.
Wow, thank you, Prof. Thank you for this wonderful background, insight, definition on issues of the concept and the trend where the world is going. Okay, Prof, I'll come back to you. because reading your work where there you presented 2010, that's about 16 years ago when you made a presentation at Ibadan during the retreat of the Police Service Commission. You distilled the context, the history of policing. And, at the point of recommendation, one of the things at that point, I mean, that was 16 years ago, it might have changed. You said, one of the things you alluded to was the need to reintroduce constabulary police service. I'll come back to you on how that makes meaning within the context of the state police that we are, trying to get into, and what could be done in terms of coordination. But we'll listen to Napoleon. Napoleon, before then, just to share this with you, and of course with our listeners, participants online, in the poll by Nextier, and this aligns so much with what Prof had just said, that so much talk everywhere, the streets, the markets, about state police. So the poll that we carry, Nextier conducted, 63% of those who responded said that they understand the process required to amend the Nigerian constitution. 63%, and overall we saw so much optimism, in the poll about state police. For instance, 65% said that, the lawmakers will pass the bill, and then both at the national level, and that there will be two-thirds. 78% said that once the bill gets to the president, that, the president will grant assent. Then on whether state police, when passed, the state police, when it becomes a law, the bill, whether it will improve the operational effectiveness of police in Nigeria. There was also optimism, as 53.6% of the respondents showed. So it still aligns with what, Prof, the politics of distraction, Prof, if you allow me to use that. Could that also be the opium of the masses? But as regards issues, that would, issues around effective coordination, many were not sure, whether there will be effective coordination between federal and, state police if established. So, Napoleon, with your experience around issues of human rights, rule of law, and all that, do you think that there would be, some of the reasons that our respondents cited were a struggle for superiority? Do you think, assuming that the state police comes up, do you think that struggle for superiority will undermine the purpose, undermine coordination, and of course, by extension, the purpose of state police? What are your takes around that?
Okay, thank you very much. I think if you look at the version of the constitutional amendment now before the National Assembly, especially the one passed by the Senate, it does provide some very strong foundation for coordination. And some of it is around intelligence, it's around management of information, and also, it also provides that there will now be, of course, which is what we have currently, as against the initial version passed by the House of Rep, it's proposing a single National Police Council. So, in as much as you're going to have independent state police services and a federal state police, the police council will be one. There will be police service, state police service commission at different states, and of course at the federal level. So already that National Police Council, which is made up of 36 state governors, the president, National Human Rights Commission, the Public Complaints Commission, and what have you, would bring a lot of actors together. And that alone is a starting point of coordination. All right. So, and there are other sort of mechanisms that the law already envisage for coordination.
But the problem is not whether the law has provided for it. It is whether that will play out eventually. Because you're going to have contestations. Of course, the point you made around superiority context, I would put it around jurisdiction context. So if the federal police is going to be responsible for federal crimes, protection of assets, things like cybercrime, terrorism, border security, interstate sort of policing and all of that. And then the states police services are focusing on state crimes. What happens when there is kidnapping? Would the state police say at the point of kidnapping, this is a state crime? Or with the federal police say, stay away, this is, at that point, would it be defined as a federal crime, as against state crime? So many issues that we beset the coordination will come in. Definitely from the get-go, there is need to put in place sort of clear protocols in terms of how all of this is going to happen, beside what the law has provided, but in terms of how do you put the provisions of the law into operation. So all of those will come in terms of dealing with issues of whether cooperation or coordination, because even in the present police force, internal to themselves, there is a lot of strife around issues of coordination. So when you start having independent police, how is that going to play out? How is it going to play out state to state? How is it going to play out horizontally and vertically? How are all of those going to play out? So I think these are things that, as we reflect on it, we shouldn't be fixated by only the law itself. We should be fixated by the lessons we're drawing from our experiments of not just the police, including every other sort of entities that currently exist.
Yeah. So, quickly, let me just remind our guest online that, in the next 5 minutes, the chat box will be there. So you can drop comments. We have eminent experts here to respond. If you have observation, comments, contribution, please feel free to drop them. And then our eminent guest here will respond to that. Before I allow you, take a breather, Napoleon. So, interesting thing you've mentioned. Vertical coordination should also be looked in terms of vertical coordination, that is between the federal and the envisaged state. And then we have 36 states now, horizontal, right? So what are some of the ingredients? I know you've talked about intelligence sharing. You mentioned about database, perhaps. What other critical ingredients are we envisioning in the area of coordination?
Well, I mean, there are certainly going to be different opportunities for coordination. I mean, even at the sort of horizontal level, when there is a suspect, there is a hot pursuit into a different state, what does that mean? But if you already have a liaison, and maybe there is already a sort of a bilateral state-to-state sort of agreement around those, it's easier to deal with those sort of complexity, right? Would you say because you're chasing and then the suspect has moved into a different territory, would you enter that territory? Or would you say at that point, it is now a federal responsibility because the suspect has moved from one state to another state? So those sort of opportunities would definitely abound for coordination. I think training itself is another thing we're going to look at definitely, in terms of, will all states from the get-go need to have their independent training institution? Or would some state rely on another state to say train people?
Yeah.
And then that itself could be a point of coordination. If we can have like a national sort of policing plan, for instance, which requires at the federal, there's a national policing plan that is forward looking at the country overall, and then you have state policing plan. That itself could also be an opportunity for liaison and engagement on regular basis. Definitely, there would be other sort of bodies that requires, for instance, since we're going to have, if that becomes the case for the National Police Council, it means they would also be responsible for recommending. They initially used the word commissioners, but now state commanders in each state. So the recommendation will come. That itself is also an opportunity for a stronger sort of interface. Police service, federal police service to state police service commission is also another room where those coordination can happen. So the opportunities are there as long as they are deliberate and they are willing to sort of explore those, as you use the word, ingredient for cooperation.
Yeah, thank you. So this is extensive, and one of the things you just mentioned, the National Policing Plan. I'll come back to you on that as you collect your thoughts. So, Prof, reading through the 19-page document, I mean, I read this, many years ago before I knew that, would have this opportunity to meet, and, meeting you here again reminded me of the document. So I quickly went to my archive, I brought it out again, so it gave history of the policing experiences, why police, the reforms, so to say, in that particular document. But, one catchy point I saw at the conclusion, where you talked about, possibility of constabulary service. I mean, within the context of state police, would you want to share more thoughts, your thinking then, 16 years ago, and today, in terms of the need, for constabulary, or if it's, you're also using that to refer to today what we might call the state police, and how you think that will address some of those issues, of course, that you mentioned in this particular document?
Thank you. First, thank you, Napoleon, for this bringing this thought about coordination, and especially the one you underscore that law does not direct in Nigeria. I think our expertise is to enact law and violate it recklessly, without consequences. If we're looking at Nigeria's security architecture as it is today, without the state police, there are three important organs of the state that handle that, and neither of them are functional. None of them. This is in the sense that they ought to function: National Defense Council and National Security Council and Police Council. These are the three most important organs in national security architecture. Why do I say they don't function? There is no effective. Do you know the Secretary of National Defense Council? National Security Council. You do know the Secretariat. National Police Council. You know the Secretariat. And the National Police Council should have done most of the things that we're even talking about now about coordination. All the 36 governors are represented even in the current police council. And they are the highest organ that has overseen and supervised police in Nigeria. But I don't think since 1999, if you ask where they have called the meeting as a meeting for it, I won't be sure we will get 6 times. What has happened is adjacent to other meeting when there is need to confirm an inspector general. It's either after a council of state, then of course they call them by the side and say, I hope you don't mind. So I think that's the challenge. Whatever organ you create for coordination, it will disappear. The people who are supposed to run it will disappear after they get what they want. So there was, I think a literature, you must have come across it, which they describe America as a litigious society. I always think Nigerian elites are so, if you like, I don't want cantankerous, except when they are sharing the loot of corruption. Then there is commonality. So the challenge is whatever arrangement you put in place is not likely to be adhered to. And so you find a lot of the problem you're already addressing. As to special constabulary, I think I'm even more convinced today than I was then. And that is because of the way that policing is changing. Not police is changing. The mark between police run by government, policing by government and policing by non-government agencies are actually getting more and more blurred. So you find people are talking about, when people talk about hybrid policing, they're actually talking about interconnectivity between government policing and non-state, non-governmental policing. Luckily for us, in an unfortunate incident, the effects of terrorism actually show clearly how these boundaries are collapsing. It's not that, I say unfortunately, because in the context of terrorism, we now talk about civilian justice force. I recall before 2009, if you saw a policeman or a soldier and said, this is the way we should do this in other civil military relation we are talking today, you won't teach my job. But today now, what do you hear? Oh, security is not the police job alone. It's not the soldier's job alone. It's a collective job. So, and that reflects what is happening worldwide. I was just reading now, I think part of the proposal for the Britain is actually saying that people with certain specialized capacity are specifically being encouraged, or if like, give them incentive to become constabulary. And who are those? Those who are in computer cyber crimes, related issues. So it's artificial intelligence. They are now asking them, please come and join. Constabulary is a volunteer service. It's a volunteer service. And so they are now asking them to come because they've seen that they've declined over 10 years from about 20,000 constabulary in Britain to about 5,000 last year. So more than 2010 you were talking about, today I'm actually more convinced that we need to police Nigeria effectively. We need constabulary service, this volunteer service, that people can bring their service, police can be receptive to knowledge of other Nigerian citizens that can help in resolving this crisis. And it's not just about crime, physical crime, because most of the time we're just talking about this. Intelligence services, for example, who is predicting the consequences of different economic decisions? It's intelligence. I mean, if you have, you just wake up and you throw an economic policy. Who had, in other countries, they will have done an intelligence analysis of, if you do this, these are likely to be the consequences. They are part of intelligence analysis. And how does it influence decision making? I do know that a Department of State Service actually had an economic intelligence unit. But the question is it done before decision or it done after decision have been taken, which is very difficult for you to calculate that. So I think constabulary, like I said then, is even more important. Perhaps even if we had done this, we probably may rethink what kind of this thing we are talking about. I think one of the things that you and Napoleon mentioned is, in places where there be police reform, they are never hurried, as we are doing. For example, the Britain one, which is trying to collapse the 43 police, is to end 2028.
Wow, that's about 3 years.
Yes, that of Scotland took about 18 months. That I think 14 months. Then that of Netherlands, when it took 18 months. So it's not this one that the
That's
National
average,
Assembly,
2 years.
yes, the National Assembly is trying to pass, and the president, the states are, in fact, the governor said, we've asked the governors, the House of Assemblies to be waiting for you so that they can. And once it comes, I'm sure it will be done. The rush at which we are doing, police reform is not the same thing as other reforms. It's not like any other reform. It's expensive, and it also can be undermine your national security. So I think if we had the time to think through this, to look at what happens in other countries, it means that the National Assembly should be satisfied with just amending the Constitution in a way that accepts the establishment of state police, and then allow enough time for people to reflect, from people from different sectors of society, to reflect what should that police look like, what should it do, and who should do what, and not rush them as they are doing. And I think that might be the undoing of the current reform, the rush about everything for political gain. So constabulary, especially in the light that now it's simply bringing non-police officers. The advantage of constabulary, even then before, where we had it in the 60s, 70s, is the beauty that the man has one leg with the public and one leg with the police. So he can explain police to the public and the public to the police. That's the advantage of this, and it's close to what people are calling community policing. They were a very good, visible mechanism for doing it. And it was in the context of community policing that actually said, maybe our own in Nigeria should actually look at the whole process of constabulary as its own distinct way, because there is no one way of implementing community policing. I think Nigeria police, accepted that recommendation. That's what they're trying to do, but they really don't have the structure of what they should be doing along that. So yes, I think we should go for, we should strengthen our business and include it. And it doesn't undermine this. So you can be a constabulary to the federal police and a special constable to the state police. So there is no contradiction between the two.
That's interesting. Just a follow-up question, Prof. So from your definition of police, structure, policing, the activity, it does appear that already there are some form of plurality in policing, or in Nigeria, and over the years. For instance, so because of course in this your literature, we also saw that. So, for instance, we have some structures doing some form of policing. From your experience, how well are they? Have they coordinated? With the federal police, those structures. From your experience, how well have they coordinated?
Okay, partly because what we should actually be doing, unfortunately, is not police reform. Again, that's another thing. There's a difference between police reform and policing reform. What we should actually have been doing in our context would have been a policing reform. How do we want to police ourselves, and who will be the stakeholders, and how do we coordinate ourselves? Not the police relate to one another. If we had done that, things would have been different. Again, this is a trend that started in most countries in the some mid-70s and early 80s. It blossomed that people like we started writing about it, about the role of commercial policing, and which is an interesting way about coordinating. For example, what does that mean? In most countries now, advanced economic society, you now find that commercial police are actually more than government police, and that's where the world is going.
Okay,
that's the world is going. You are finding people, commercial companies, running policing services, and even in South Africa, it's ratio 1 to 5. Britain, the ratio is far more. where you find one
government,
yeah, there are more than 5 years.
commercial.
Yes. And what, let me give you an example. For example, in Cape Town, it's possible in many areas there. But let me just give, there's an area you call Rodin Bush, which is just one that is surrounding the university there. Many of the shops there are obliged to have electronic monitor. And this electronic monitor has a central control system with the police. The police need not post people there. They need just a few staff in the control room. Once there is something, they send something within 5 minutes, there is somebody responding to that place. That is a commercial policing system, coordinating with a state policing system. In our own case, our law, just to see how we have not done that well, it's not mindful because we are not thinking of policing. We are talking about funny things. The commercial police forces are regulated by civil defense. And yet the major, what they call the lead agency for internal security is the Nigeria Police Force. Ideally, what we should be doing as part of the regulation is also create incentive for the guards. I didn't call it private gas company. That's what the law says. Is to create incentive. What incentive do you create for them? For example, police can include them in some kind of training. When it's running leadership training or some other intermediate training, you can say bring 5, 6, 7 people who will be part of that training and create that incentive, and then they have shared intelligence. They see more than the police see. They may gather in front of your house. If you are armed, where I say state police. If you are an armed robber, your security man knows that you are an armed robber. There can be a police closer to you. And they will share. And your driver who takes you everywhere will tell the guard. And I say, our guard, they go one place where I don't understand, though. And that information. So we have not really looked at what policing should look like. But at another level, like you said, hybrid police, and not even hybrid, multi-level. If we use the word policing, and that's why when people use state policing, it's meaningless in Nigeria. I think just another demonstration of ignorance. There have been state policing all over Nigeria. When you go to Lagos, people fear LASMA more than Nigeria Police Force. They fear Kia people, Kia more than police, because they are all over the place. That is policing. They are not police because Nigeria define police as somebody carrying AK-47. That's part of a headache. And once an agency is not carrying AK-47, we think it's not a police. That is also part of the challenge.
And they are not authorized to carry AK-47.
Yes.
By the law.
Yes. So they are not police. So I think that's the challenge we have. Yes, state policing has been on in environmental area, in sanitation area, in collection of fees and all those things, in compliance with those. Policing is a securing compliance. Anything activities that you undertake to see compliance with the defined or prescribed rules. That's policing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Prof. Napoleon, I come back to you. I'll come back to you now. What I suspect, I see some form of pessimism in coordination, operational coordination. As you already mentioned, the law envisages an instrument or an institution that will coordinate, all right? But whether there will be actual effective coordination, I'm sensing some form of pessimism. And if you look at the polls, we also find that pessimism. While many of our respondents are optimistic that there will be state police legally and that they could reduce insecurity in terms of coordination, that pessimism also showed here. 39.13% said they were not sure whether there will be effective coordination. 28.99% simply said no, that they suspect there won't be coordination between the federal and proposed state police, and then only 31.8% said there will be. So I'm feeling some form of pessimism. So that means just like Prof is saying, the issue. So if we were reforming policing, coordination might naturally falling. But then you mentioned about the National Police Plan. Is it something you want to share briefly with us? And particularly what it speaks concerning coordination.
So I think Prof is probably an authority on national policing because they were the people we sort of learned a lot of this from.
Absolutely.
But let me start from that point of the pessimism. There will be a lot of things that would shape and influence coordination. Have you noticed states with a different political party as against states in the central, as against the federal with a different political party? Do you think coordination would really be strong? Right? Especially if we were to get to a situation we've had in the past where they say federal is withholding a state fund. Right? We've had that instances in the past. How is it going to play out? If some states are better well-to-do than other states. So that itself is going to create different regimes of mechanisms that have been developed in those states where with the seamless sort of flow and coordination happen. If, as I mentioned earlier, there's also a point as to interpretation of what a particular crime is as against, the jurisdiction margin, if I may use that word. How will you deal with those sort of issues? They will definitely creep into coordination issues. So I may not call it pessimism, but I would say those sort of cheating issues that would influence coordination, and I would imagine that that's probably the areas where your respondents are coming from because they've seen these over time. There are even states with boundary disputes at the moment. They are not loud, but policing issues might actually amplify them. Police issues might, amplify those issues.
Wow.
So you will have all of that to deal with. In terms of the National Policing Plan, I guess from a practitioner point of view, I wouldn't. Prof has all the concept and everything, but I will speak as a practitioner. And it's not now like something outside of the law. At least it's well recognized in the Police Act 2020. And I think if you look at, if I'm not wrong, under Section 9, where the powers of the IGP has been defined, the first clause there, the first responsibility there, is for the Inspector General of Police to create a national policing plan. What is all of this about? It's basically the whole idea that in planning and defining what you would do in the following year, just the way we do budget appropriation, it should be driven by prevailing needs, right? And that means that you need to have data to be able to do that.
Wow.
People should not just sit in one room and draft budgets and assume that they are tackling the whole issue. Every context you go to have their own dynamics. Those issues should count eventually in what shape and forms the budget. So, if in my own area, we did some surveys last year, we found out that, yes, there is so much talk about kidnapping, but kidnapping did not come top on those who spoke to us.
Okay.
It was things like, I think, people going and breaking into people's houses in their absence.
Okay.
robbery. Those kind of things came first. Of course, kidnapping came along the way as one of the top, crimes. So it's taking the data at the specific level where police is to be able to determine what should the budget priority be, what should we be prioritizing. So if you're dealing with kidnapping in your own police division and it's widespread, then you begin to determine how many kilometers do I need to patrol per day. On the basis of the kilometers you need to patrol, you will say one vehicle is not sufficient to do it. I would need 3 vehicles. If I'm going to fuel 3 vehicles to be running for this length of time, what will it come down to? Okay, kidnapping is strange to us. We do not have capacity to deal with it. What does it mean to train a police officer in that regard? Right? So you begin to itemize those priorities. What does it take to run the police station on daily basis? On the basis of those priorities, you then build up what your budget, what your annual appropriation would be. Right? So on the basis of that, you can put out an objective statement of what we are at this level in crime in our community. We are asking for this money. If at the end of this year, we intend to beat this crime up to this level. So it's also an accountability too.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have said, I need this money to do this thing up to this level. So if at the end of the year you have not achieved what you said you would achieve, you would have answers. Yeah, you have to account for all of those things. But it basically also helps to prioritize policing on the ground, because you'll be faced with myriads of needs on the ground.
Yeah.
Of all of this, what would be my top 5 of things I want to deal with and deal with them up to this level?
Yeah.
So if there is something at the national that basically paints an overall picture, at the state level, it begins to look at how we deal with them, in a more minute manner. That could be a point where they come regularly to interface and share ideas, intelligence, and how they are dealing with issues. And there is even an opportunity for lesson learned. You share with me how you are doing your own, I share with you how I'm dealing with my own, and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's some of the places where the national policing plan sort of come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But
So,
just on that, I wanted to sort of cover a very important point Prof made.
Yeah.
About the constabulary.
Okay.
We must begin to look at how mindsets are shifting in other sectors and apply it in the work of the police. So, for instance, I'm sure sometimes on the internet you can see some young Nigerians who have actually procured for themselves solar energy system. They have procured enough more than they need, and they're able to sell part of it to their neighbors, right? And make money from that, because it's related to the point about Prof made about commercial police, right? So police itself need to look at that dimension. I worry about governance, Prof, because that's always our problem. The ability to be able to govern that space and ensure a proper oversight, because everything is always open for one abuse or the other. And if there is no strong oversight of that system, there will be abuse. So as we go into state police, these sort of things that Prof has, espoused and explained also need to form part of our consideration
Yeah.
as we begin to define what in practical term it is going to look like on the ground.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So as we round up, I'll just take 60 seconds concluding comments from Prof. Again, I'll look at this within the context of our poll. So so for many of our respondents who feared poor coordination, they highlighted what could be the impact. So it is like a theory of change, if you permit me. So if there is poor coordination, then so a lot of them say erosion of public trust in the police. That is when there is poor coordination that we will see there, public trust will weaken, that is for the police, and then there will be delayed response to threats, in terms of, working to address threats. And you already keep mentioning it. For instance, in Nigeria, we have the penal code somewhere, we have the criminal code somewhere. So all this, would need to be considered. And Prof also mentioned around the incentive for rushing through the reform, and the potential, gaps that could come up from there. Prof, in your concluding comment, what would you say, in the next 60 seconds that we could do at this point to ensure that, coordination, becomes meaningful across the multiple levels of the police structure? I've learned so much today about policing and and police. Okay, so Prof, what could be done differently, if possible, to better strengthen coordination?
Yeah. Luckily, Napoleon just talked about policing. That quickly, I will take it to, we really need national policing strategy, from which national policing, the policing plan that means a policing strategy of maybe 5 years duration. And then from there, the police at all levels will draw depending on what is the problem in their area, will draw the annual policing plan and how to do that. If they do that, then there will be an upfront document on what is important to each state and then how to relate to one another. I think that will be one way of dealing with it. But we don't have national strategy, even within the federal police. What we have is each IG comes and say, my 10 points of this thing. And then once he leaves, I think we have to have national strategy, national policing plan. But it's not the problem of the police, like I always say. It's the problems of governance in Nigeria. Once upon a time when there was a country, we used to have development plan that lasts 6 years or 5 years, but it had been abandoned from late 1980s till today. We don't have a long-term development plan. I think the longest is 2 years or and that means we actually have no future. We can't think through beyond that. And because we are regime people, everything is about the regime in power, nothing beyond him. And that's why we're not developed. So I think we need to actually have a governance system that is about Nigeria, not about a regime.
Yeah.
Regime will come and contribute to it, but then, of course, Nigeria will continue to carry those visions forward.
Oh, wow, excellent. Thank you. So, even though, Prof, you have said it all, just like Napoleon, I think that you're an expert in human rights. So it's also your right to quickly conclude in 5 seconds here.
Yeah. Prof clearly have, highlighted my thoughts, but just to say that for the first time, I would mention in UNDP with support from the German Federal Foreign Office, we are working with the Nigerian Police Force at the moment to develop, I think, Prof, you would say the first of its kind, I wouldn't assume, the National Police Strategy, which of course would also add value to the work we did with the police in 2024-2025 on national policing plan. And I think these are things that even the state can ride on when they come on board by simply adopting the annual policing plan approach as Prof has rightly espoused. So on that note, I think Nigerians should approach this with keen eye as we go into do our police and look out for every opportunity to ensure that their inputs count. Right. And I think government also need to ensure that for Nigerians who will be the direct beneficiaries of dual police system, they should ensure that the voice of Nigerians also counts in the development process.
Oh, thank you. Thank you sincerely, Professor Alemika, distinguished professor of sociology, criminology and sociology of law. Thank you, Napoleon, for being here. Distinguished participants, we thank you. So we have learned so much. Standing on just the last concluding comment by Napoleon, he has emphasized one thing: the work that a lot of people are doing behind the development partners, the civil society, like what they do at the UNDP to support, police and policing in Nigeria. And of course, this is also a clear call for civil society and citizens, of course, working on issues so we don't give up. Let's not give up. It's that from the discussion, it does appear, there is hope, light at the end of the tunnel. So don't give up. Continue to air your view. The government should also open up the space for more civil society participation. Thank you once again for joining us today. The Policing Conversation, Nextier's flagship platform for discussing issues around police reforms and then the current transitioning, from single-tier police structure to multi-tier police structure. We'll see you next month as we take up another issue on the policing conversation. Thank you, and do have enjoy the rest of your day.